find the answer for
Yeah,
them.
exactly.
And take them to the answer if we need to.
Right.
So,
The other thing, and this is just more like a fun. Backstones, you were really upset. So just
sound check.
sound check. We're good? Okay, so then just count me down whenever I'm. Oh, we're here. Good evening, everybody. I'm so happy to see everybody here. This is inQUEERies number 6. So, for those of you who don't know me or are newer to the church, my name's Kendra Mitchell Foster, and I'm part of the Affirming Ministry team group at Trinity United here. And as part of the affirming process that we went through this past year, and we had our vote in February, we started a series called inQUEERies. And this is all about exploring LGBTQ2SIA+ issues, acronyms, language, what it means to be affirming, and another thing that we're really passionate about is sharing queer history. And so that's what we're doing today for inQUEERies 6. It's called Love Wins because we have with us Theresa Healy and Wendy Young. And these lovely human beings were part of the court case that fought to legalize same-sex marriage in BC and in Canada. So we want to welcome everybody here in the sanctuary, but also folks who I know are tuning in from all over the place. I know there's somebody from Winnipeg, so we're reaching out there. And the other thing that I want to do just before we get started is to begin with a moment of gratitude. And just let's all find our feet on the floor. And we'll just begin by gratefully and respectfully acknowledging that we are on unceded Lheidli T'enneh territory. and that the Lheidli have been the sacred guardians of this land where the two rivers meet since time immemorial, and they continue to be that. And that we are here as uninvited guests on that territory. And as grateful as we are, we still want to walk in that path of right relations and humility and learning, and moving toward reconciliation. So at Trinity United, as part of affirming ministry, it's of course centered on queer, tonight we're centered on queer justice, but affirming ministry is very much about intersectionality. So finding solidarity between all different sorts of people that are interested in dismantling oppression. So welcome everybody. So we're just gonna do, one more quick thing before we get started with talking is that we have a new partnership at Trinity with our Pride Week events and with our Camp Spirit that's happening next week. We're partnering with Positive Living North, which is an Indigenous HIV/AIDS organization here in Prince George. They do amazing work. And so there's a couple of cans. One of these is up here, there's one by the front door. If you feel like you want to spread a little bit of love and sunshine, we're collecting donations for them tonight. So that's enough for me, because we're here to hear from Wendy and Theresa. I just wanted to, first of all, say to both of you how exciting this is, that you're here, and how grateful I am that you said yes and that you came.
Of course we would.
Of course. And so just if you could, Theresa and Wendy, say a few things about who you are, where you come from, where you were born, how you ended up here, and how you found one another.
I don't think it's that long a session.
Just a summary, a summary.
Well, I'm Theresa Healy. Most people call me Tess. I teach at the university in the School of Planning and Sustainability, and I also worked at Northern Health, and I also have a small research company that I get to do fun things with. And I ended up in Prince George completely by accident. I came up for a 1-year contract and just fell in love with the place and stayed. 1 year. That's about like 28 years ago. And I think I was born in a convent in Ireland. My mother was raped, and I was the result of that, and I was kept by the nuns, and they tried to get the children adopted, and I was never adopted. In fact, when they finally did find someone, they asked my granny for permission, and she came to the convent, banged on the door, took me out, and wouldn't let the nuns or the church have me, and reunited me with my mother. So I grew up in England as an Irish Roman Catholic little girl, and it wasn't a happy childhood. So I ended up running away from home, and I was living on the streets, and I was a hippie. And the thing that probably saved my life was was getting pregnant at 17. And so I started university at 28 with 2 kids, a single parent, never having really finished school and not really knowing how to use the comma. So, but now I have wonderful children who are grown and have children, and they all moved here to be close to us. And I have a PhD, so I'm a living example that you can, the power of the human spirit to overcome, even if your very origin is in an act of violence. So that's me, short story.
In a nutshell.
Yeah.
So not in a nutshell. Wendy Young. I am born and raised American and came to Canada, Prince George, British Columbia in 1986 because I liked the way the school system supported the special needs kids. So I came up and I said I would come for a couple of years, and for the first 4 years my mother sent me job descriptions of jobs back in the States. So finally I photocopied mine and sent it to her, and I said, match this and we'll talk. She stopped sending the jobs. So yeah, I started in the school system, was there 20 years, and then left to do a very cool Indigenous project throughout the province, where we got to incorporate elder wisdom and voice with youth learning the technology and pictures from 26 different communities for the academic setting. So that was an amazing opportunity. I've been director of the Arts Council here 8 years, and then wanted to go back to my roots for speech and language, and tested out Northern Health, and wasn't as good a fit as we would have liked, so came back to the school system. So now I'm back in the school system working with the kids, and the supports and programs are better than ever. So I'm staying till they're tired.
And what she isn't telling you is that she's quite the magician. Often the children that everybody else has given up on, Wendy has some kind of magic. Kids and animals.
Wow.
Dogs that bark at everybody come to her.
Nice.
Yeah, some kind of magic. I think it's why we do so well in our relationship, because she's got this.
She's a test whisperer.
Wow.
So you're both here in Prince George and have been for a while.
Mm-hmm.
How did you meet?
I'm not going to believe it.
You tell it, you're better at it.
We met at a hockey game.
Excellent.
Yeah. We had a mutual friend, and she kept saying to me, you have to meet Wendy and Dee, because Wendy was in a relationship. And I was like, sometimes somebody says, oh, meet my best friend and you'll get along, and you don't actually, because they're in different pockets, right?
Yeah.
But, so I was not eager to do this, and I put it off, and I was living in a cooperative household. And once a year, each member of the household got to pick something they wanted to do. And David wanted to go to a hockey game, so I went to a hockey game. And
you had to enjoy it.
Yes.
You couldn't just go and,
Yeah,
you had to
roll
go
your
and
eyes.
enjoy it and have fun.
Yeah.
I like that part.
It worked. And so anyway, I ran into our friend Laurie, and she said, Wendy and Dee are here, you have to meet them. And I thought, okay, I'm not sure how many things there are in a hockey game, like 3 or 4 or whatever, but it'd be short. So I said, okay, let's do it. And I don't know if we've even told you this, but when
Dirt.
yeah.
What?
I was coming down the stairs, and Wendy was standing in the gap between the seats, right? And all of a sudden, I wasn't in this hockey rink. I was on a hillside, and I could even feel the texture of the shore. It was the most bizarre thing. Anyway,
I was at the hockey game.
So anyway, that was disconcerting enough on its own, and so you look at me, I talk. I was speechless, and so after that, I'd been in Prince George, I think 4 years by then, never seen her ever, and now I'm tripping all over her, and she's with somebody, and my relationship that I had been in had broken up because my lover had an affair with my best friend, and there was no way I was going to do that, but I was so torn that I started wearing like mini skirts and trying to attract her attention, and then I'd be mad at myself. And
I was oblivious.
Completely oblivious.
Because I was in a relationship.
So what happened, sadly, you should take over from here. It's your story.
How much more do they want to know?
Want the dirt.
The dirt. Well, my relationship broke up because it turned out that the person I was with she was a financial predator. And she didn't care if you were young, old, male, or female. If you had money, I didn't, she thought I did. That's what she went after. She did clean out the bank accounts, I did buy her a vehicle, but
She maxed out all your
yeah,
credit cards.
she maxed out all the credit cards. She told everybody my house was hers. Yeah, all kinds of fun stuff. But she went after one of my colleagues at the time that was questioning her sexuality, and I invited her to come over, and so she'd be comfortable, ask questions, whatever. And within a week, my relationship was done.
And so Laurie phoned me, our mutual friend, and said, you have to call Wendy. Dee just left. And so now I didn't want to be the shark going after the fresh blood. So I phoned and she wasn't there. I left a message and that felt comfortable. And then she called me back and we talked for forever. And I was so worried though that I would do what I'd done in every other relationship, which is we sleep together, so therefore I love you, so therefore we move in.
Right.
Yes, I don't know if all of you know the lesbian rules. One date and you rent a U-Haul and you're moving in.
Yeah.
With the cat.
At least
I'm allergic,
one.
At least one
At least
cat.
one cat.
Yeah, no, I'm allergic. We're safe there.
So I insisted that we actually mimic heterosexuality. We were going to date and not sleep together for at least 6 months. Now this was really hard.
That's amazing, actually.
Yeah.
There were crab and lobster dinners bet on us. And right towards the end, I was ready to have a jet flown in from Newfoundland with the live crab and lobster for everybody so we could just cut this out.
Yeah, just give up, right?
Yeah, but we did.
You made it.
We made it. Yeah.
You made it. That's amazing.
Yeah.
We went out of town. Didn't come back for like 10 days.
I'm a fly fisher. That was the Stalaco trip, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Aw, Stalaco.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Special place.
Beautiful.
So you guys got together, and then one of the things that a lot of people, you were saying, don't know that you've done. You exist day to day. Of course, you're human beings. You go to the grocery store. You have jobs. You do all these things, and you interact with people each day. And a lot of people don't know that you are these like epic, iconic people that have changed history for gay people in Canada and hopefully the world.
I think it started a bit of a chain reaction in Canada.
Yeah, good.
Which was nice to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember being at a Pride event at the University of Winnipeg when we heard about the ruling. And I was in a relationship at the time with someone I'm so grateful I didn't end up with. And she says, it's legal, we should do it just to do it.
Someone says that, run!
Yeah, run, right?
Yeah.
But I know at the moment when the legislation came through or the court case was won, there was this wave of ecstatic frenzy that went through the queer community, and it's because of the work and vulnerability of folks like yourselves, because of you. And so
There was a
wanting
bit of
to hear that.
dissonance in the community though, because not everybody was pro-marriage.
Yeah.
Right?
So that was interesting to come up against, a little bit unexpectedly in a couple of situations.
And actually, I think that was harder than, there was opposition. There were religious, evangelical, right-wing people who felt that if you give gay people the right to marry, then the next thing they're going to want to marry their toaster
Right.
or their dog.
Right.
So
Nice line of logic, hey?
It really is, it's a logical next step.
Yeah.
of course,
What
Yeah.
if you have a toaster oven? Because that is a lesbian thing.
It is.
yeah.
It is. I
Only
love toaster
only
ovens.
after you've brought in 7 into the fold, then
Yeah.
you're eligible for a
For
toaster.
Good.
Toaster oven.
Yes.
Shona and I are on our 3rd toaster oven.
There you go. Tess got rid of ours. She thought it was taking up space on the counter. Didn't like it.
We just could never meet that quota. I think actually one thing I'd really like to say about this though is that when we got involved, we were nominated by our local gay and lesbian organisation who had been contacted by EGAL, which is Equality for Gays and Lesbians Everywhere. It's the national rights organisation. And they contacted Gala North, and Gala North asked us if we would consider this. So you've got 2 feminists, neither of whom believe in marriage, who thinks marriage is a tool of the patriarchy. But
A tool.
If you're heterosexual, that means something. But if you're lesbian and you can't get married, it doesn't mean a thing. So we talked about it, and I said, okay, if I want to say no to marriage, the no has to mean something. So that's why we got involved, was simply for the choice that you could choose to get married.
We hadn't even talked about getting married at this
Yes,
point. We had said we would have a commitment ceremony, and we
did.
actually had the first interview with a gal the night before our commitment ceremony that was we have a huge backyard. Tess calls it a garden.
Yeah.
It's enormous, and it was just done to the nines at that point in time. So
Yes. And so we ended up having our commitment ceremony and thinking that we were in this for this sort of idealistic reason. Freedom of choice is the cornerstone of feminism. Well, the more we
and
learn,
stubborn people tell me no, watch me.
Yeah.
But what happened, I think, and it was a tough process. We had to write an essay, we had to have do a survey, we had to be interviewed by this panel of 9 people before we were actually accepted.
Voices that we had no idea.
Yeah, it was teleconference before the days of Zoom.
Yes.
Right.
And so we ended up agreeing to do this. And the more we learned about marriage, and the history of marriage has always been a fight for people on the outside. Because it used to be that, you know, if you were wealthy, your father said who you were going to marry for the family fortune or military alliances. If you were poor, you were just picked up by the plantation owner or the lord of the manor. So marriage has always been this statement of capacity to enter into legal contracts, and it was being denied to us, and the consequences, so that if when Wendy had cancer, would I have been recognized to actually be beside her? If one of us died and the family was not supportive of our relationship, and this has happened to people.
Not us.
You're widowed and the family just comes and takes everything, your family home, all the things you built together. So not only do you lose your partner, you lose all the things that you built together. So the more we learned, the more we became
Annoyed.
well, and actually thinking, you know what, we want to do this. Marriage is a radical act. And that's the conclusion we came to. And that's when we went all in. I think that's what they say, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
All in.
Only if you're betting and you have a good hand.
And so, and I think you guys had a good hand.
Pardon?
And I think you guys had a good hand.
Oh,
And so what was that like? You were approached by the local organization, but knowing that this is going to be a nationwide petition for the human rights of same-sex marriage. So did you think about the immensity of what it would mean at the outset? Could you conceive of what that would be?
No.
Wrong is wrong.
Yeah.
yeah, there was that simplicity, but there
That would
also,
be
also this thing that I can't explain it. It's like when there was the legal right, I hadn't thought about the joy that would come from going to somebody else's same-sex marriage.
Right.
I had never imagined it. And they had told us this would take 5 to 7 years, so we weren't terribly excited about it.
Okay.
Yeah. And IGAL was fantastic. They trained us, all
Yes.
the couples. We would get together on these telephone conference calls. We were trained how to talk to the media. We were taught how to respond to, religious opponents. And
What? They didn't like me doing that.
yeah, apparently that doesn't work. So to be able to speak with respect, even to people who are treating you disrespectfully. And I think both of us felt that we were really well supported in Prince George.
Yes.
Our friends and family were really concerned and thought, our pets would be poisoned in our car.
We lived a little bit out of town. We live out on the Heart, where it's a little more rural, and my colleagues were concerned because we had little fur balls and a nice home, and they were worried about what could happen. And happily,
And there was opposition. There was a particular woman in the community was vehemently anti-homosexual and anti a whole bunch of things. Apparently she used to go into the school libraries and take pages out of books. I mean,
Oh my goodness.
yes. And
Yeah,
so
lovely
there were
person.
people like that who would write letters to the editor, and they were painful to read.
Because they had poor grammar, they weren't spelled properly. If you're gonna call me something bad, spell it properly.
Yeah. It's true.
It's just a little thing that bothers me.
Yeah, you can't respect an opponent if they can't spell, sadly. But the thing that I think hurt more was when you weren't prepared. So you'd be listening to the radio and it'd be a call-in show, and they're talking about the forestry industry, and all of a sudden a caller would start talking about the same-sex marriage case and how it was going to ruin Canada, and so you weren't prepared. The other part I found hard was the people who in the gay community who felt we were betraying this
Yes.
unique culture of gayness. And, you know, feminist friends, the editor of Extra West, vehemently opposed to this. And I remember saying to Wendy, the worst thing I can wish on the editor of Extra West is that he falls in love and wants to get married. And I have to tell you, 3 years after it was legal, guess who got?
Did he get married?
And we didn't get invited.
Yeah, we did another one we didn't
How
get
rude.
invited to. Yeah. So opposition within from our own was hard and unexpected, but I don't think we thought of the immensity. We just looked at what was in front of us. So we had to go down to the registry office and get a marriage license and get turned down.
Right.
You know, so there were things you had to do, and you didn't really
In
think.
front of the camera. This was
Oh
all.
yeah, CBC was really.
Yeah.
And knowing that this was the process, that you were going to go there, apply, and get turned down, knowing cognitively in your mind that this is what was going to happen. What happened emotionally for that moment when you were denied in front of the camera?
Well, not for her.
I thought, okay, stay tuned for the sequel because we're not stopping here.
But you found it hard.
Yeah, I did. Even though I
emotional.
knew it was going to happen. And in fact, I was worried, what if they give us one and if the whole thing? So,
And it's on film, so we have to go through it.
That's right.
so even though I know it was supposed to happen, it still was a wrench. It was like that punch in the stomach. You sort of gasp. But
We looked at each other and said, that's why we're doing this.
Yeah.
And I've always said one of the things that I really love about Wendy is she can make me laugh even in the hardest of times. And so that's what she does. She does, you know, and it makes it easier.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I don't think we anticipated. And certainly I was telling Kendra one of the stories I wanted to tell was how we were invited to a same-sex marriage here in town. We'd met with the young couple and talked through a lot of things. One of them, her father wanted to walk them down the aisle, and she's a feminist. She didn't want her dad giving her away. And I said, but isn't that fantastic? I mean, how many young gay couples are not going to have fathers who want to do that? Well, what they ended up doing was having both parents, mum and dad on either side, and they were opposite ends of the barn out at Hubble Homestead. And they walked towards each other, and both mom and dad put the two together and then followed them. It was the most, I know,
Yeah.
there wasn't a dry eye in the house, I tell you. Anyway, at that wedding, people would thank us for doing this. And during that time when everybody goes off and takes pictures, this young lesbian came and stood beside me, and she's sort of looking at her feet, and she says very quietly, do you mean to tell me there was a time in Canada I couldn't have married my girlfriend? And I went, where were you? And she said, well, when did it happen? And I said, well, 2003. And she said, I was 9.
Yeah.
And it hadn't occurred to me that we would have young people growing up not knowing that this had been a thing. They had always known that if they chose to fall in love and chose to marry, that they could do that.
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't expected that, not quite so soon.
No.
And that's amazing to see that and experience that firsthand.
Yeah.
And so it was 2003 that it became legal. And when did this all start? How long? They said 5 to 7 years. You guys said 5 to 7 years. So when did it all start?
It ended up being 2 to 3. BC, Ontario, Quebec, and the Yukon, it was legal to have a same-sex marriage in 2003. In 2005, it became legal for the entire country. And so we had same-sex marriage happening here in Prince George before they did in the Castro at San Francisco, which is the big gay mecca of the world.
Yeah.
And we had same-sex marriage before they did.
That's
and
amazing.
I don't know why, but that just feel good about it.
Well, you should feel good about that. It's amazing. I have goosebumps, actually. Yeah, I think it's amazing. And that one thing that I love about Prince George, because I'm not originally from here. We moved up here in 2013. But one thing I love about Prince George is that there are incredible stories of incredible people here. And it's very unassuming. Like, you wouldn't think this is a gay mecca. But really, when Shona and I moved here, we realized that the gay community was huge.
All the women were plaid here.
Yeah, right?
They're wearing hiking boots, all of them.
We're going to be safe, right?
I have to tell you that mutual friend, Lori, she was American as well, and she came up for a job interview and went back to her partner in San Francisco and said, oh, the women are lesbians, and they talk about partners, and they all drive trucks and wear boots. So they took the job and came.
And here they are.
And then found out the rest of the story.
Yeah.
Oh, wait.
So you folks were in Prince George. Was there anybody else in BC, or where were these other couples distributed across the country?
Well, BC had their own contingent.
Yeah.
We were the most northern, and it was a surreal experience to go down and meet all of the couples that were in the court case.
How many in total?
In BC, we had the BC 6,
right,
and then there was another four couples or another 2 couples from Victoria, and so they put our cases together. So the EGAL group, we added in these other 2 couples who were fighting for it as well. In Ontario and Quebec only had 1 couple, and I think Toronto had 3.
I think 3.
And then there was 1 in the Yukon. And we were trained, we got to know each other really well. We're still all in good friends, and all of us are actually still together.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Wow.
And one of the things that we have a friend who's a really strong feminist, and she was opposed to marriage. She's gay. She didn't want to get married, didn't think any woman should get married, but supported us because she supported us. And I remember her telling me that she was walking her dog the day after the ruling came down, and she said, I felt different. Remember that? She felt different. So even though she might never get married because she still didn't believe in it, the win changed how she felt, how she moved in the world.
And how did that win change the way that the 2 of you moved in the world? After all the, the feeling, the internal.
Yeah. Well, Tess said, well, should we get married?
Yeah.
And I said, oh, no, it doesn't work like that. I want the flowers, I want a band, I want a nice dinner, and I want a ring, and you want bed and eat. Then I'll think about it. And I was being a smart ass. And she went behind the scenes and made that happen. And Gala asked us to teach ballroom classes so people could learn how to do the waltz.
Because we actually danced together quite beautifully.
Yeah, she leads from a follow position, as most femmes do. But I said, okay, yeah, we can do that. Well, what I didn't know is we were getting everybody ready for my wedding and reception and my proposal.
Yeah, it was just the proposal.
Yeah. So that was a. I'm usually the one that's the romantic and does all of those sorts of things. So I was just being a smart aleck when I told her I wanted all of this. And
I need good directions to be romantic.
I gave her a
That
script.
sounds like a good
idea.
And all of our friends were in on it, and all of our friends just looked like the cat that swallowed the canary. They were so pleased when we had this ball that was actually a proposal. So,
The other thing that was quite lovely, though, was when Gala North asked us to be the Pride Marshals.
yes, and that's when we decided that we should be married, and we got married in the park. So we had a commitment ceremony in 2000, right? 2000,
2000.
right around there. And that was the one in our garden, and then we were the parade marshals and got married in the park.
And the woman who made the woman who, remember Cindy's cake? The woman who catered our commitment ceremony, she had designed a cake, and she replicated it for over 200 people, because we had it in the park, and we wanted it. We felt that we owed it back.
Cake.
Yeah, but we owed this back to the community.
Yes.
We've done this in public, and everybody had been so supportive. And I was told a story. The woman who gave me away, she had gone to sit on a bench because she was older and needed to rest. And there was a woman sitting beside her who asked her what was going on. And so Jackie told her, Jackie Baldwin, the poet, Jackie told her what was happening. And the woman was quiet for a while and nodded her head. And she turned to Jackie and said, "Don't ask me what I would have done if I'd had this opportunity."
Oh,
Isn't that wild?
Go find her. I want to hear this.
yes.
It was a very cool story. We had quite a few moments in that day that are remarkable. Many of them were caught on camera, which was nice. So, yeah.
And so as a part of your wedding in the park was part of the Pride Parade. There was a lot of people there. And there's pictures, of course, from this. And just from talking with you lovely people, I know that, and for the Winnipeggers that are tuning in, I know that this picture is in a very special place in Winnipeg. So do you want to talk a little bit about the Human Rights Museum?
Go ahead, Esther.
How you ended up in there?
Well, actually, this story has a sting in its tail, that the work is never done. You think you've won something, and sometimes you haven't. So we were asked if we would be part of the exhibit on the same-sex marriage case in Canada in this beautiful new Human Rights Museum in Winnipeg. And we were so proud and so happy about that. And then, I don't know if you've been watching the slideshow, but we got an email from the director that there had been these instances of racism and discrimination and homophobia. And what they had been doing was, when schools came into the museum to see the exhibits, they were hiding the same-sex marriage case. It was being put behind curtains. And of all the stuff that we went through in fighting for this right, nothing hurt me as much as that did.
Winnipeggers, go speak up over there, will you please?
And it was because the one place in the world that you would expect to be safe, the Human Rights Museum, and we weren't. So that really hurt an awful lot.
I think what hurt the most was we found out after.
Yeah.
And so nothing proactive or preventative could have happened because it had already passed.
And they have worked really hard. They've now developed an entire policy, but at the time it was really, really painful.
I wanted to go to Winnipeg. I was told no, it's probably not correct.
She likes to run things over with her truck that she doesn't agree with.
Well, it was at the time it was a white truck, and many people drive them, and it had a grill that was nondescript.
Just drive the truck right into the museum.
Yeah.
You have
Run
a
somebody.
new display.
A Wendy Young display.
Yes.
Wendy Young original.
Yeah.
So how many years after 2003, after your wedding, how many years was this that the exhibit in the Human Rights Museum was being
That was just
We got June 2020. We got the email, the letter telling us what had happened, and it was an apology. They were apologizing for this.
So this is 17 years after you won the case, after queer folks had the right to marry. 17 years in the Human Rights Museum.
Yep. The bullies won for a while, then they straightened it out.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about it being in the museum, many of our friends would go when they were
To
there.
see it.
And so we got pictures of our pictures.
I
Look
love
what I found! Look what I found! It was such a nice little surprise from people.
And you were saying that there's a lot of support for you here while you were going through the case. So can you just let us know a little bit about what that process was like? So you go, get denied for the marriage license, and what was next for you?
You had to do an affidavit. You had to swear to this legal document describing what had happened. So legally now it's an issue and it's legally recorded. So that was the next step. Then we had to write our story to the judge about, you know, who we were and why this was important. And in fact, in the age of Google, you can go and find all of these documents. It's just incredible. You can actually go and read the things that we wrote and the other couples wrote. So right now, this is a BC case. We are, we're going to the provincial court, and we actually lose. So we appeal. That's the game, right? And the big thing in our appeal was that Justice Pitfield said, yes, of course this is discrimination, but it's a necessary discrimination to protect heterosexual marriage.
Get out the white truck, you're gonna drive it or something, right?
I now drive a different truck.
Yeah.
So of course we won the appeal. Now meanwhile in Ontario, they won their case, but the other side appealed. So, you know, it's this tennis match back and forth. But we've finally appealed to the BC Supreme Court. They appealed to the Ontario Supreme Court. We both win. And so now it's going to go, because they're appealing, it's going to go to the Supreme Court.
Right.
And then that is the decision that's going to, you know, there's no more appealing after that.
Right. So that was that then, when it's in the Supreme Court, that's the high stakes, right? Yeah. That's the bet. So as this case is being escalated, what's the experience for the two of you at home with, you know, with support, but also resistance at home? What was that like?
Oh, I have a favorite story about that.
Okay.
At the time I was traveling and doing presentations and facilitations and with technology and software to support special needs. And I was in our airport waiting for my plane, and the woman did this that was the ticket taker, and I'm like, something's wrong. Okay, what? So I went up to check, and she said, "You're Wendy Young." And I said, yes, thinking something had happened with my ticket. She said, "I need to thank you."
Oh.
And I'm like, "You're welcome." For what? And she told me about her niece, who had seen us in the paper and read it, and then she had been very depressed and none of the family could figure out why. And so the article that she read about us was a catalyst for conversation for her to come out. So that was very cool.
And both of us are facilitators, and one of the things you do when you're a facilitator is you try to make sure everybody's having a good experience, right? And so somebody comes up to you at the break and says, "Can I talk to you?" And you get ready, okay, done something wrong.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm gonna fix it, I'm ready. And every time it was a story about how being visible in northern BC had made a difference to a family. And there was one mother who talked to us, and her child was suicidal and she didn't know it, because this kid out in a small community simply didn't know that there was anybody else like her. And this is before the internet. It's before you know, Oprah talking about these things. And so we had been, we had paid attention to our friends saying you might get into trouble. So we were ready. We were ready to be attacked, and it never was. It was always the opposite. And we must give credit to the local media.
They rock.
I think they were really annoyed and irritated by this small vocal minority, and they set out to make sure there was a balanced record.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah. So we were on the front page of the paper, we were on news segments. Anytime anything happened in the case, they came to us and got the local take on the case. It was
remarkable.
Yeah.
Good.
Yes.
So let's talk, because we're in a church.
Yes.
Let's talk about that vocal minority, because we want to, like, as Christian people, but also as Trinity Church, we want to acknowledge the amount of harm that continues to be done, has been done, and continues to be done to the queer community by people in the name of Christianity, in the name of the Christian Church, and in the name of Christ. And so let's talk about this vocal minority and how religion played a role in some of that.
Wow. They used religion as a shield, and they didn't have the right information to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
So for every argument they could bring up, we could counter. But that's not really winning.
No.
See, the other thing, though, I think that this case really enabled what I would consider a true Christian to rise and to have, for example, Peter Zimmer, who was Reverend of St. Michael and All Angels, he was so supportive. In fact, we asked him to come and bless our commitment ceremony. And
he got special dispensation from the church to do that, because at that time the church was split and hadn't made a hard, fast decision about what they were going to do.
And so he'd gone to his bishop, and the bishop had said, I don't think he used this language, but keep it on the down low.
Right.
Because they wanted the congregation to have the freedom to explore and come to their own conclusions and not harm that. So for me, it was about, because I told you how my life began. I was very anti-church, very anti-religion. And it was actually the same-sex marriage case where I began to realize that there were differences within the Christian community, just as there were differences within our gay community or the feminist community. Mm-hmm. And I hadn't known that. And that was a really nice gift out of that, was the fact that the religious people who weren't interpreting the Bible, that, I mean,
to hit you over the head with, versus open it and share it.
Yeah. So that was I think that was a really neat outcome that we hadn't expected either.
Yeah, and I mean, I was happily not Christian before I met my wife, and she took me to a church that was full of these kinds of Christians, and I thought, well, I didn't know that.
Why aren't you trying to save my soul?
Yeah, right in my own backyard. My mother, there are 4 children in my family, and 3 of the 4 of us are gay. We don't know what happened to the 4th, but we still accepted her. Included her in all the events. She was the breeder. She had the grandchildren. It was all good. There's more to that chapter, but I digress. My father was a Eucharistic minister, and he's standing out in the foyer getting people to sign against same-sex marriage. And I'm like, he did what? My mother came out, and he wanted her to come and sign it, and she said, no, Bob, no. She turned around and walked out the side door and walked home 5 miles. She was so angry with him. He followed her for the last 2 or 3. Come on, Carol, get in the car. Come on, Carol. No. She was that upset on our behalf, and that he would do that and use religion as a weapon.
So you can tell where the stubbornness and the sense of it right and wrong comes from. Mm-hmm. Apple and tree.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
thank Carol for that.
Yeah,
She's awesome.
she is.
We caught her off guard, 3 of the 4 of us, and she has just rocked it. So, she bought the champagne and the cake for our commitment ceremony. She wasn't able to be here in person, but sent up one of my siblings to represent. So yeah, it was awesome.
It's wonderful.
Yep.
And I think you're right in your phrasing of using religion as a weapon, and the things that are just, they're trotted out, really. They're these very predictable responses that are trotted out almost as on rote. A lot of times, saying, well, this is this and this is this, and I'm really happy. I'm so very happy to know that there were other people that came with different interpretations of Scripture, with different understandings of God, and different understandings of Christianity
in general,
and community, right? And that's so important.
Something you might not know about, but that was an undercurrent to the same-sex marriage case, is because it was heading for the Canadian Supreme Court, the Canadian government established a royal commission, which is all parties. So there's members on the commission are appointed. They're from all the different political parties, and they are going to explore the issue of same-sex marriage and come back to the Parliament and tell Parliament what they found out. Well, they began very much opposed to this notion of same-sex marriage. However, as they crossed the country and they had the hearings, the opponents of same-sex marriage were presenting, and they actually convinced the Royal Commission to be in support of same-sex marriage. It was, their arguments and the hatred, the way that they presented contrasted so much to the more academic, the more emotional, the more
considerate,
sentimental,
dramatic.
Yeah. But it did get to you. I know that Wendy was traveling a lot, and I don't think I've watched this channel before or since, but the channel that is the government, it's the stuff that the government does, and you can watch it. And so I was watching all of these hearings, and I remember one night listening to this professor from University of Montreal talking about how we needed to be saved from making this terrible mistake that would burn us in hell for eternity. And for some reason, I don't know, I was tired. I thought, he's right. And by the time she phoned, because we always talk, I was like, we can't go through with this. She's like, what are you talking about?
A, turn the TV off. B, get some sleep.
Yeah, but because some, you can be weakened, right? And you can start to second guess yourself. Think maybe this is really wrong, and God doesn't intend this, and you are going to burn in hell. Yeah, so it was a.
And I think that's oftentimes what people count on when they trot out those the tried and true oppositions to same-sex marriage and same-sex relationships and just queer lives in general, is that they kind of count on people maybe being off balance, maybe doubting themselves enough that they're going to suppress, they're going to conform, they're going to do whatever, right? But it doesn't work, and we all know it doesn't work. And it's instantaneous, and then you come to your senses, and you can
have a little bit of sleep.
Yeah.
Partner told her she was goofy,
and you're okay. So I love this quote. These are printouts of of Tessa's slides. First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. It's a Gandhi quote. And that, I loved it that you have that on the slide that says we won. And I think that that's really profound in that the winning, of course the winning is profound. But this trajectory of first they ignore you and then all the way to you win. And it reminds me of that story of the woman on the bench.
Yes.
Don't ask me what I would have done had I had the chance. She was ignored. And then we've come to this place where this woman, this young woman at this other wedding says, "What?
Yeah.
That happened?" And that's winning. So it's from being ignored to winning, you know. And the thing I love about Gandhi is the nonviolent aspect of it, and that's something that I hear echoed in what you're talking about, with the difference between the hate from the opponents and the consideration, the compassion, the humanity of the people who are proponents.
Do you know what they did? They made me actually read the Bible. I am a reformed, recovering Catholic, and I had to go read the Bible because they weren't getting the arguments right. And I'm like, no, actually.
Wendy's very particular.
Oh, I had fun with that.
Things are
It's
right.
like, oh, you don't know your Bible. Which version did you read?
There you go. But that's important, right? It's important to understand what people are internalizing and how they're creating their worldview and their arguments. How do you understand people that are coming at you with either telling you that you don't exist or telling you that you can't exist? And the nonviolent way of doing that is growing in understanding and engagement. Yeah.
And discussions around the dining room tables changed.
Yeah.
The things that I see happening in our local schools now to support our children. We got approached, one school had an old school teacher and they weren't quite sure what to do about her to bring her around. I said, oh, I'll talk with her. And actually that was one of the things that we're going to do. But at the same time, Tess knows a publisher friend who does children's storybooks on all kinds of different things. What's it called? The Radical Pelican?
No, Rampant Flamingo.
Oh, pardon me. There we go.
Rampant?
Yes.
Flamingo.
Flamingo. I thought it was Pink Flamingo for years, and it wasn't. It's Rampant Flamingo, and they're wonderful children's books.
Well, there was a little one questioning her identity, and they weren't quite sure what to do. So we ordered a set of the books and had them delivered to the school.
Yeah.
And the counselor went and read them in every classroom, which opened up the conversations, which was really nice. And the little one that was questioning her gender came gender fluid, and she's a she now. And everybody accepts it, and the girls are jealous of her dresses.
There you go.
And I think that's the other piece of then you win, is that then there's another fight. And I think right now what our little ones are going through is this denial that they can know who they are or that they can question who they are. And my question is, when did you know your sexual orientation? And you children do. You do. There's a time for children when they don't. They actually don't know what gender is. And you say to a child, what do you want to be when you grow up? A mermaid, a unicorn, a fisherman. You know, they don't have boundaries. We as a society start putting the boundaries in. So I really feel that this is the new frontier, is going to be around gender identity, the way sexual orientation was.
The lovely thing was that I'm out, I'm me. The resource teacher came and said, Wendy, we need some help, which was nice. And I was able to help, which was nice.
And that's something we want to let be known. We have informally been a resource for the community. We've actually taken in children who've been disowned, and we consider them our children.
They're in the will.
Yeah. And we danced at our gay son's wedding.
I got to give the blessing. How's that hilarious?
That's amazing.
There was panic, and he came and said, can you do this? I'm like, seriously? Okay. It was fun. But yeah, we got to dance.
That your son's wedding.
Yeah.
And you guys did talk about, just as we were sort of sitting down and setting up how we're gonna go about today, you did talk about what it means to be seen as a resource in the community. And I think that it's incredible, absolutely incredible, that the two of you are here and you've made your lives here, and that your lives are, you've got this amazing, love-filled, beautiful life. And
Very lucky.
yeah, and I think that queer folks, oh my gosh, I'm getting emotional. I'm wearing mascara, I shouldn't cry.
You'll be fine.
Yeah, but I think that we as queer folks, and even as allies, find strength in examples of people who can be absolutely regular, loving, compassionate people and have done these incredible things and still be responsive to what the community needs. And for me, seeing the two of you move through life the way you do, it models what's possible. Is in the gay community, with a lot of the mental health stuff, suicides, AIDS crisis, all of these things, we've lost a lot of our elders. We've lost a lot of the grandmothers, grandfathers, grandparents, and a lot of the mentors that straight kids, they can look and see what it's like to be a trans granny.
Yeah.
They can't, straight kids can't quite imagine somebody having a trans granny, right? Because they only have straight grannies. And so queer kids, there's that little girl, does she have somebody to look up to? And I think that as part of building community, we need to look at how different generations can be resources, right? Like with folks like yourselves taking in kids who now probably have kids, who then will have friends, and there are gay grannies all over the place, but we've been ignored for a long time.
Nanny, grandma.
Nanny and grandma.
But who got called grandpa?
Every grandchild for a few years would say Grandpa Wendy, and then without thinking it would become Grandma Wendy. And the youngest one, Elsie, the kids are coming up for dinner and they are off in the order of age to go and wash their hands to come to dinner. And as Elsie goes by, she says Grandpa Wendy, and Alexa, who's the oldest, turns around and says, "What did you say?" And I said to her, "You used to call her Grandpa Wendy too." And it was just, everybody had a grandpa and a grandma, so this must be grandpa.
Yeah.
Right?
So they were concerned, so I don't care, as long as she calls me something.
Yeah.
Go wash your hands.
Yeah. Make sure your hands are washed.
Our oldest calls my dad Papa, and his partner Papa Jan. So she's Grandpa Jan.
There you go.
Yeah. So yeah.
Well, you know where her heart is.
And Des, actually, our oldest, is gender fluid, so it makes sense, right? But yeah.
Parker, he's our first. He's the grandson that we're the closest to, because they moved here to be closer to us. I was at the birth, and he's in school, and the
Soji.
Yes, the SOGI, the education about gender and sexual orientation, comes to do an education in his classroom. And she asked some question, and he says, "My grandmas are famous." And she said, "Why? Or how are your grandmothers famous?" And he said, "Well, they won this." He doesn't care about the other couples. They won the court case so they could get married. And of course she says, "I think I know your grandmas." And he is just so thrilled, because that proves we're famous.
I've got street cred.
And actually, Elsie, the littlest, she has a friend who's been questioning gender, and she wants to be supportive. So every grandchild till they turn 12 gets to have Grandma Wendy make whatever cake they want. And she's made some of these.
And they challenge me.
Oh yeah, they really go for it. But this year she wants to do rainbow theme because she wants to support her friend. So it's little pieces where you're just living your life, and it's like the ripples in a pond. They just spread out.
Well, I don't know if you know, Elsie, I'm a warm glass artist as well, and every year for Pride, I make a Pride piece and I sell it at cost, so anybody who wants one can afford one. And I've had several come and rake the yard if they didn't have money, so they could have a pendant. And bless their hearts, every one of them that I made that deal with showed up. And we live off the bus route, so give them full marks. I was so impressed with that. But Elsie, Grandma Wendy, you're making Pride jewelry this year? Yes, sweetie, why? Well, my birthday's in August. So I think I have to find out how many are coming to the party and make sure they all have a Pride something.
Oh, that's beautiful.
It is.
Yeah.
So we have 3, we call them the pods. And so we've got a total of 5 grandchildren. And it's been really interesting because I've been concerned because before the same-sex marriage case, remember Denise's daughter? A friend of ours, she's a lesbian couple, her daughter is going to high school and is being threatened by a guy who's going to bring the gun from his dad's house. And here are ours, and I'm watching what's happening to them as they're getting older, and it's that danger seems to be less. So
more acceptance, more education.
Yeah,
It's not chats around the dinner table.
Yeah, more experience and more relationship, right?
Yeah.
More community building.
Yeah.
I just wanted to go back to what you were saying with that you're never quite done, and there's always something else. And in the slides that that we have on the loop test that you prepared, you talked about the first gay divorce.
Oh, yes. Nobody thought about this. You could get married, but you broke down. You couldn't get a divorce. A couple actually got married for the purpose of getting divorced to actually establish gay divorce. It was
wow.
It was like really startling.
They got married to make it legal so that people could get a divorce.
Yeah.
Wow, I didn't realize that was part of their story.
Yes.
My
I don't
goodness.
do anything this week. Let's get married so we can get divorced.
Yeah, and they were also the story. They were a BC couple as well.
Yes.
Yeah, and were they also women?
Yes.
Yeah, amazing.
It is interesting. There's not as many gay male marriages as there are lesbian marriages. And there's a lot of reasons for that. The gay male culture is very, very radical, very strong. But as one couple that did get married were talking to me and saying, how much of that is because you didn't have the choice? You know, there was no way 2 men could get married, so we're going to have this radical lifestyle.
Plan B.
And I do have to say that this is privilege. If you are poor, if you are Indigenous or a person of color, your experiences with being gay and lesbian are not vastly improved by having the right to same-sex marriage. And so it is a privilege. I think that we had to fight for it, we had to get it because it's a range of options, it's a range of other rights that are attached to it. But I do recognize that for some members of our community, it hasn't been the blessing that, you know, universally we would like to think that it was. Does that make sense?
It does, and I think it goes back to what we were talking about at the beginning with the intersectionality piece of this, and that gay rights are human rights, and human rights include things like racism, like especially in Canada, anti-Indigenous racism, like sexism, ageism, ableism, all of these things. And so as I you know, during Pride Week, one of the things I really love to reflect on is in this idea of matrix thinking, where do we in Prince George sit in terms of privilege and in terms of disadvantage, right? In terms of privilege and in terms of prejudice, and how vastly different the experiences in the queer community are, even between folks that, like, I often get, well, you don't look gay, you know, folks
Oh,
like
I'm
me,
not following the dress code again.
right? I know they're going to take my car away.
Toaster oven, please.
I've got toaster oven. But you know, the way that we appear, you know, people who are cisgendered versus people who are transgendered versus people who are non-binary versus people, you know, all of these differences within our community, including race, culture, ethnicity, sex, all of these things, ability, makes this win more or less significant, and also depending on the time of life, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Got there some.
Yeah. But I did want to go circle back to one point that you made earlier about having the opposition from within the gay community and having those elements of gay culture threatened. And what were those elements? I mean, I think that one of the parts of inQUEERies that we're trying to do is help folks who don't understand gay culture, gay experience, gay history, gay including, of course, all of our trans siblings. But we want to sort of let people in on what some of these cultural elements are, what some of these historical elements are. So what was it really? You know, if you can pick a few. I mean, this is a huge, like, gargantuan question, but if you could pick a few points, this resistance on the threat to gay culture that marriage is, because we always hear gay marriage is a threat to straights, not gay marriage is a threat to gays. Yeah.
It's really interesting. Somebody did their PhD on this, and it's called White Wedding.
Nice.
And very interesting. It's a lot tied in with feminism and the patriarchy and capitalism. So all the criticisms of those systems and seeing marriage as part of those systems and opposing those systems.
Right.
So it sounds counterintuitive. It really does.
Yeah.
Well, a couple of our own friends didn't agree with us fighting for the right to be married. And it was really interesting to sit down with one of them, and she said, I have a couple questions. I said, I have a couple answers, no guarantees. And she said, I want to support you. I said, cool. She said, but I don't agree with it. And I said, well, we can agree to disagree. I'm fine with that. And she said, okay, but I want to be supportive, like in the community about it. And I said, well, then be supportive. If you don't agree with it, look at it as it's another option that has never been afforded to us, and choose your options.
Mm-hmm.
She said, okay, I can do that. Mm-hmm. And it was interesting because she's very much a feminist, very strong, very articulate. She couldn't wrap her head around this one. And when I said it's okay to disagree, she kind of went, really?
Mm-hmm. Wendy cuts to the chase. It was like, I will talk with you for hours. Let's just disagree. That's okay.
And it is okay to disagree, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it is important to acknowledge, I think especially when having these conversations in institutions like churches, where a lot of people are like, well, we're affirming, we're welcoming, come on in. And there's lots of gay folks that are like, no, I'm good. Like,
Thanks.
I'm not going to be a part of this institution.
I'm not drinking your Kool-Aid.
Yeah, and partially, I think there's an experience of individual affinity. You know, if some folks just don't want to be religious, some folks aren't even really all that spiritual. But there is a cultural element to say that if I'm gay, if I'm a gay person, if I'm a trans person, then I have to stand against these institutions that denied me humanity and dignity for history. You know, I was born in 1980. I wasn't around during the Stonewall riots, but when I was, you know, militantly lesbian at the University of Winnipeg, was thinking, like, I don't want to be part of institutions that denied the people in the 60s. In the 20s, you know, hundreds of years ago. I don't want to be part of those institutions. And by having queer relationships and by going to gay parties and gay bars and pride, I was standing against all of that. Mm-hmm. And so this institution of marriage, like you said, capitalist, patriarchal, political, it makes sense that people would say, well, that is everything that being gay isn't.
Yeah.
And then there are people, I could never really quite wrap my head around conservative gay folks in Manitoba. How does that work?
That's like the South, people in the South of the States being Republican.
Yeah.
What?
But gay.
Yeah.
So there is room for disagreement, of course,
Absolutely.
and there's room for dissonance.
And I look at it more as that's how it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
We're changing it. We're changing form. We're changing the shape. We're changing the boundaries and parameters. To have gates in the boundaries at least, so you can come and go.
Yeah.
I remember being at a house party. So when you first come out, you're like, everything is gay, everything's rainbow. The supermarket checkout person asks you how you're doing. I'm gay.
Yeah.
Got my
I
card.
want to make something of it.
Yeah.
So, but I remember being at a house party and it was just jam-packed and I'm in the line for the washroom and there's a lesbian, I don't know her very well, she's standing in front of me and Margaret Thatcher has just been elected. And she said, aren't you happy that Margaret Thatcher got elected? And I'm thinking, no, I'm not. Why this? It never occurred to me that somebody who was gay could actually subscribe to any conservative ideology whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And it startled me to realize that this wasn't, and you start off with the lesbian communities, this mythical Camelot place.
Yes.
And then it isn't.
Yeah.
And you come into terms with the complexities of our communities.
Mm-hmm.
There's some pieces where you go, what? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. How did that happen?
Yeah. Like, wait, how?
Yeah.
I still actually can't even articulate it.
Just let me use the washroom. Go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You must have had too much to drink. The other thing I do want to say that I think is important is when you become so, your identity is now your identity and you don't have to come out,
Mm-hmm.
or you think you don't have to come out because you're not coming out. You're just so out. I'm in Prince George. Everybody knows I'm a lesbian. I'm teaching actually this week the Gender Outlaws class. I first taught it in 1999. And it's a 3-hour block. It's a night class. And I go to the first class and I make everybody sit in a circle because that's how I teach my classes. We develop a learning contract, how we're going to treat each other, because students have really nasty experiences in classrooms. And then we do some really fun stuff. And I go home that night. I think we've had a really great class. Then about 3 weeks later, in a lecture, I say something about my own being a lesbian. And I can tell all of a sudden that the students have just gone rigid.
Shields up.
Yeah, and you can tell, you know, as a student, your profs will read you. And so, what the hell have I said? And I said, so what's wrong? And one of the students said, so you're a lesbian? And I said, am I not?
Somebody revoked my membership.
What happened? And it turned out that before I arrived in the class that first night, they'd had a big fight. There were some young, feisty, gay community students who were students in the class and, you know, should be a lesbian teaching this class. And then so I arrive and I teach the class, and then of course everybody likes me by the end of the class, and nobody cares anymore. But then I come out as a lesbian, so now it's complicated, the whole conversation again.
I love it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I actually said I don't have to be a medieval knight to teach medieval history, and there is something special when you have somebody teaching a subject like this where lived experience matters.
Absolutely.
And there are some things that will supersede that.
Yeah.
And so anyway, it made it much more complicated. and that's when I began to realize that coming out, you think it's this thing you do once, and it isn't. It's something you do frequently. And there are going to be times when you don't come out because you don't feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
And you know in milliseconds. I'm sitting on in an airplane having a lovely conversation with somebody and they say, what does your husband do?
Mm-hmm.
Now, do I come back with, well, my partner's a speech and language pathologist, really works wonderful magic with children? Or do I say, Wendy, my wife, is a speech and language pathologist. I know when it's safe, and if it isn't safe, I'm not going to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And I, for a long time, I felt like I had to,
Mm-hmm.
that, you know, you have to be visible, you have to stand up, because people aren't going to start accepting gay people until they know some. But there are times when you have to pay attention to your gut.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Not all of us.
Wendy, of course.
And we have different guts, right?
Yeah.
Like, my gut says yes, your gut says no, your gut says right.
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. And that's how I move in the world.
Yeah.
And that's not how Tess moves.
And that's the gift,
Mhm.
right? The gift of marriage, of course, but also the gift of community, that we all have different ways of being.
Mhm.
And it's all okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So just I'm looking at the time, and I'm wondering if anybody would like to ask any questions, or if they want to. Yeah, Beth, there's a mic in the middle there. If you want to go up to the mic, Bob's just going to turn it on.
And adjust it. 'Cause
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basic question. Basic question. How long, what was the timeline between when you filed the first affidavit and you won the Supreme Court decision?
2.5 years.
Oh.
2.5 years.
So it was filed in 2000, right? And won
2001.
2001.
And then we won, and that was early 2001. And then we won, I think it was August 2000.
August. It surprised us because they had told us that we were in for the long haul and this was kind of a medium.
It was, and I do have to say that for some of the couples, like Wendy and I were pretty sure that we were not going to win. We were in for the long haul. And when we lost that first round and we came together, some of the other couples were devastated because they had hope, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I'm Irish. We've been fighting for hundreds of years, and you know, you just fight, you blow things up. And so I'm quite okay that we've lost. We're just going to do the next round.
Yeah.
But they were,
Yeah, they were. I was surprised at the reaction
Yeah.
because I expected
we expect
longer.
I actually have a follow-up. I guess it's a legal question, being heterosexual. There's legally, in the heterosexual community, if people live together for 2 years, they're considered legally married in terms of finances and whatever. So I'm curious if you're aware if that's happened in the gay and lesbian community.
Common law relationships, yes.
Yeah, common law relationships were very common, but that equality of legality to your relationship, when we were fighting the same-sex marriage, that didn't exist. It was only for the heterosexual community. And there was an argument that said, well, you can, you know, we've changed the law, now you can do this. And the title of the PowerPoint is nothing more, nothing less, because we called that marriage light.
Mm-hmm.
And all I want is the same choices that anybody else has. Nothing more, nothing less.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so, and there still are couples, both heterosexual and in the gay community, that do the common law.
Well, and when it came to the legality components, two of my employers immediately put my partner on my benefits package, my medical coverage, all of it. That wasn't the same for other people though. I had very enlightened employers, I guess, because that didn't happen everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So now it has to. That was one of the things that was important to us.
And I do think there's something about the win that when Wendy was diagnosed with cancer, and it was an incredibly scary time for all of us. And I remember thinking, I can't imagine doing this without having that legal status. At least I didn't have to worry about that part. And every person in the hospital there, the respect we were treated with.
Top drawer.
And of course, Wendy makes everybody laugh. Like, all the kids have come over and they're all terrified and crying and carrying on. And you said something like, look, we don't even know what's on the table yet, so could we not cry until we know?
Yeah, because we brought everybody to tell them that I had
Yeah,
been
that's
diagnosed with cancer. Everybody's like, ugh. I'm like, this is what's going to happen. This is the next step. When we get to the third and fourth step, that's when, if we have something to worry about, that's when we worry. Right now.
And she made them laugh. Like, I remember Natasha saying, I can't believe this. You're making us laugh. Shouldn't it be the other way?
Yeah. Wow. It's a gift.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions? Honestly, ask us anything. I do this in my class, and I have this anonymous.
The audience is like, no.
Ask me anything.
Ask me anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is a golden opportunity.
And if you go home and you think of something and you want to ask, our contact information is in the slides. So.
And you can always pass messages on through affirming at Trinity PG.
Yeah, because it's hard to get up in front of the mic sometimes.
And if anybody at home actually too, in Winnipeg, chat if they want to chat a question, then that's good. But yeah, come on up, Fleming. Yeah.
I just want to ask, well, actually, two pieces. First one, where do you see some of the changes needing to happen legally, if there are still some pieces that you see within our society? And the second piece is, how can churches continue to be supportive? Like, what does that affirming look like for
Thank you
churches,
for
and
that
how does
question.
that? Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Once the legality component, going forward, my concerns are with our gender fluid kids. Is what I'm concerned about right now, because I'm back in the school system. They are working to change all the forms, thank goodness, because it was he, she, no other option. We have different parenting permutations as well. Those aren't acknowledged in the forms. So I guess if there's any forms or paperwork that you could have a look at, so that's not the first hurdle that somebody has to get over, it's already been taken care of.
We did a research project with gay youth, this is some years ago now, and what they told us is they can tell within milliseconds whether this is a safe place. You can have up as many rainbows as you want, but within a few sentences, they know if you're a safe person or not. So being so careful, a young girl student comes in and says, I've got trouble with my relationship, and your response is, so what's happening with your boyfriend? That shut it down right there. And those pieces that are so ingrained and embedded that we don't know we're saying them, they're so much a part of who we are. Those are the things that, I know affirming, you think there's going to be big things, but often it's these little things.
Little important details. Like, come on, you guys, let's go. Wait a minute. I just gendered everybody. People, let's go.
Everyone.
Class, let's get with the program. The more generic kinds of terms until you know.
Yeah, you learn with everything you learn.
And if you don't know, you ask, why I appreciated the question.
The other thing I'd like to say is that one of the couples had been together 20 odd years when they began this, and one of them, her family would have nothing to do with them, and she was heartbroken. When we won the case, her family came around and they were at the wedding, and they got a tandem bicycle for the two of them to, because the Canadian state said this was okay, they were willing to do it, and they were willing to and they're very religious, it gave them the permission they needed to be able to do that. One of the other couples, Bob and Lloyd, are Christians. They are the most amazing couple, and they've been together for forever, and they've been very active within the church. And for them, this was a really important fight to show that Christians accepted, because they were in a church that accepted them. So yeah, the religion really is an undercurrent in this, that sometimes was wavy and stormy, but a lot of times was really a source of support.
So focusing on those everyday acts of affirming, everyday acts of support.
And awareness.
And awareness.
Paying attention.
And speaking up. I mean, that's the other thing, is sometimes you do get tired of having to be the one speaking. I mean, I think Wendy and I are quite lucky that both of us are quite feisty, but sometimes you get tired of doing the public service announcement, and you wish that somebody else would actually speak up. So the fact that the church is becoming affirming is hugely important, that it's a public statement as well as those everyday things. And I do have a little story of this time.
Yes, please.
I'm a scrapbooker. I'm not very good. I'm terrible with
Wait,
colours.
no, I'm going to stop you. I've seen her scrapbook. She is good.
No.
She's very good.
Not compared to.
But she's an everything on the Christmas tree kind of scrapbook. So now you have some frame.
So I have met a scrapbooker who teaches, and so I'm taking classes with her, and she doesn't treat me any differently. Like when she looks at my photographs and it's us dancing, there's no, you can't, not a sentence, not a scintilla of.
Not a body language change
nothing.
or anything.
And
No
she gives me,
intonation, no inflection difference.
yeah, she treats me like everybody else, and she rescues my pages. So I'm at a workshop, and everybody knows in the workshop that I'm gay. And I go to this once a month, and I really love it. But there's a new woman who has just joined, and Pride is coming up, and she starts to talk about Pride. And she starts to say things like, I don't know why they have to have a special day. You know, we don't have a special day. And I can feel everybody looking at me.
Yeah.
And I think, okay, I don't want to, I'm not going to launch into a rant. So I said, well, I think sometimes it looks like straight people have 365 special days and an extra one in the leap year. But then she isn't.
Undaunted.
Yes. She continues, and it's getting worse. And I can tell that people don't know whether to say anything or not. And I get to the point where I can't not say something. And so I start to say something about the fact that if you are a lesbian or a gay man or a trans person, you are not safe. If I go to hire a plumber, I do not know when he comes to my house if he is going to be a homicidal maniac who hates gays. We can't.
And messes up your plumbing.
Yeah, on purpose. So you don't know, right? You have all of these hesitancies in your life. And I actually started to cry because I'm thinking I'm never going to be able to come back because this is no longer a safe place. Every other woman started to talk. And the woman who runs, these are all Christian ladies. The woman who runs it's actually a pastor at a different church. And she says, I was thinking of bringing the kids to Pride this year. When is it again? And the conversation becomes this gathering of care and protection. And this woman is like completely startled because I think she expected that everybody would agree with her. And yeah, it was. And that to me, again, was another example of the Christian who protects, who doesn't harm. And that was a hard thing to go through, but the gift I got from it was those women and I are really close. Like we do scrapbooking on Zoom now.
Yeah.
I
But that's how-
scrapbook as well. I'm the backup.
You're the backup scrapbooker. But that is the way to be an active ally,
Yes.
right? Not just wearing these lovely pins,
Yes.
but standing up and having those conversations and providing that safe space. And we're just
But don't underestimate the power
of the
of
pins.
these.
Yes, yeah.
I remember we were working with physicians about them wanting to demonstrate that they're safe. And one of the physicians came up with the idea of the stethoscope has this nice round space. I'm putting a decal there,
Yeah.
you know, that.
One of them wanted me to do glass.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's right. We were going to do glass ones. And that is, people will see that. And the fact that your doctor has this hanging around their neck is,
It's a big deal.
and it's a code
Mm-hmm.
that would be decoded.
Absolutely. So I just want to ask if we're
Oh, yeah.
we're right around 8, but if there is burning desire to ask another question, we'll make time for it. Yeah, Hen.
Okay, I have kind of a basic question, but how do you deal with homophobia from parents and family members? Yeah, it's kind of a tough
I'm
one.
available for tea anytime.
Okay.
Can you give me an example of what you mean?
So my family is extremely conservative and Christian, and I'm a lesbian, and I came out, and they've been basically telling me I'm going to hell ever since.
It's going to be a heck of a party.
Yeah.
Too bad you're not invited.
Yeah. So it is hard because I am still a spiritual person and I do consider myself a Christian. But when they bring me Bible verses or things taken out of context, or, you know, this is the way God made people, you know, it's like, I don't know how to, I honestly don't argue with them because I feel like there's no point. But I guess, how do I protect myself?
The one thing that has always comforted me and that I've shared a lot is enjoy your life, live your best life. You show through your own joy and your own acceptance of yourself that there is nothing wrong with you, and they can either come along with you and enjoy life beside you, or you leave them behind. And I know that's hard, but when you get to the side where you're strong enough to say that, and you are living your best life, then it shifts. It
You'll know.
isn't going to hurt you the way it does now. And I urge everybody who is gay or lesbian or trans, live your best life, because in some countries, they will murder you for this. And so we have to live in a way that shows we are human and we're full and we bring gifts just like anybody else. So I hope that.
Off the soapbox.
Oh, sorry.
I can give you an example. I told you about my father and my mother, right? I wasn't the first sibling to come out. The third child was. I'm the oldest. And my father called me in Canada to tell me how indignant he was about this, and he only had 3 goddamn children. And I said, oh, wait, whoa, back up the bus, Bubba. You have 4 children, or by the time I get done making 2 phone calls, you're not going to have any children. So think about that. How many children do you have, Dad? 3, goddamn. Click. 4 phone calls. 5th phone call, he had 4 children. And I called the other 2 siblings, not the one who was under fire. She had enough on her plate. Called the other 2. One was the straight girl. She read him the riot act too. You have 4 children. My brother called. He wasn't out yet. He was in the U.S. military. Long story. He called and read him the riot act. So when I called the next day and I said, so I'm booking my ticket, maybe, to come home. How many children do you have today, Dad? He said, 4. I said, oh, good. And what about if they decide to bring a girlfriend or a boyfriend? He said, well, I said, careful.
Wendy is a really strong individual, and many of us will never be able to do this.
But I'm telling you this because not only was it the gay children that called him on the carpet for his inappropriate behavior, and that's what we called it, so did Trudy, my sister, was the straight one. So we banded together. And yes, we brought all kinds of different girlfriends and boyfriends just to rock his world because he's a Bubba from Hayfield, USA. And so my partner had a black partner and
Brought
she
her
was
home.
welcome.
She was a sheriff.
Yes. I said, wear your uniform, bring the gun.
But just to add, when Wendy took me home to meet her family,
This same dad.
same father, and we go out to the Friday night fish fry, which apparently is a big thing.
Big
And
deal
it's
in
a
the States.
square table, and I'm sitting across from him, and Wendy's here, and her mum is here. And all of a sudden he goes, I've just figured something out. And the three of us go, what?
We all breathe and mean.
Yeah. And he said, I think that, Wendy, you are going to have to share me with Tess, and I can be her father too. Because, I ran away from sexual abuse, so I had no father as far as I was.
She burst into tears.
Yeah.
My mother slaps my father.
For making me
And I'm
cry.
like, no, it's a good cry. It'll be okay. When she can talk, she will tell you it's okay. So there is hope, even for the Bubbas.
Thank you.
Sure you will.
So we'll just wrap up. Thanks for the questions and the involvement. But there is one story that I want you to tell before we close about who was the first person to get the marriage license at City Hall. After you went, you don't have to disclose the name, but just tell the
They
story.
school in town.
Yeah.
CBC asked us to go down. They had been with us when we got turned down. They wanted to be with us when we
We're able to get the license.
So we go down, and the
Bright and
reporter,
shiny,
Yeah.
early in the morning.
the reporter says to the woman behind the counter, how does it feel to be issuing the first marriage license in northern BC? And she says, it's not the first license,
Even
it's
in
the
Prince
second.
Yep. We got beat to the gate in our own town.
It was really fun.
And I was like, who? And then they can't release that information, right? And I'm like, who would have done that? No. They called and thanked us later that afternoon. So then I'm like, I didn't even get to be indignant. They thanked us. You're welcome. What do you say? So yeah.
I think this is so hilarious. But I do, I do want to thank you so much for both of you for coming here and sharing these stories with us and the ideas and the experience, but also both of you are these incredible forces of joy and life, and just sharing that with us today is a real blessing. So
Oh, it's a pleasure to be invited.
thank you so much.
We were thrilled to be asked.
I'm so glad.
She was so excited she was here early. She's never on
Usually
time
late.
frame. That's a big deal. That's like a first in 21 years of marriage.
They got here before I did.
Yeah, we're very happy.
Thank you so
Yeah.
much. And we're going to be putting this up on the affirming section on our webpage. So if you want to watch this again, please feel free to do that. And then just before we sign off, I just want to say again about these beautiful little cans for Positive Living North, if you want to support them. And tomorrow night for Pride Week, we're going to be doing another Queer Pride Labyrinth in the back lot. We have a beautiful new rainbow labyrinth in the back lot, and there's going to be candy and water and all of that. And then on Saturday, Our Savior's Lutheran as well as Trinity United were stops on the Rainbow Car Cruise. So make sure you come by because there's candy at both places. There's Our Savior's has stickers. They have a beautiful rainbow heart, and they're creating a new mural. You can have your handprint on a tile on this mural. So go and find that on Saturday. And then Sunday we're having dun, 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 our first in-person queer worship. So yes, you can sing, and it's for everybody, allies included. So maybe we'll see you here on Sunday night. Well, I think that's it. Unless there's something you want to close with, I think we can.
I thank you for being here. We didn't do this alone, and I'm so glad you came to be here with us.
Yes, this is me being quiet for a change.
Thank you guys so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Let's give them all. Yeah. And so, yeah, we don't have